Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
And our very great pleasure to welcome to the program now Councillor James Cootes, who's got many hats to wear. Council and strategy and operations and audit and risk and also transport. James, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I hope I'm not putting you off by mentioning all those various responsibilities that you have.
Well, actually, just to clarify, I've stepped back from audit and risk, and Gwyn Compton, who's the deputy of my strategy and operations meeting, has taken the lead on that committee. In the previous triennium, I used to go to all the audit and risk meetings, but this triennium, Gwyn will be sort of taking my place there. And it's just acknowledging the workload, particularly of a ward councillor as well. So,
Absolutely.
I found a ward councillor tends to be a little bit more higher level of commitment than other councillors. It's not to say the other councillors don't work hard, but if you use, for example, you might have a briefing on State Highway 1 revocation as a councillor. If you're a ward councillor, you tend to have that briefing again from a community board level as well. So sometimes your meetings are doubled up.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. A lot of work to be done. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about transport, because just this morning we heard that the National Party have announced a policy of establishing a regional transport authority in Wellington, and this could be seen as a sign of no confidence in the Greater Wellington Regional Council. Have you heard rumours of such a move and such disquiet amongst official circles?
Oh, look, I certainly haven't heard that, and I haven't caught up with the news this morning, to be honest. I'm a little bit behind the eight ball on that particular announcement. I'll have a look at that with interest when I get off the phone. Look, what I have heard is that clearly the regional council isn't in the good books with central government, particularly the Minister of Transport, and obviously because of the bus fiasco. Yes. It's no secret that has been a project that's just been dogged with issues, and the minister naturally has come under a bit of pressure about doing something about that. Again, I'm not wanting to get the knife into my Greater Wellington Regional Council colleagues. It is what it is, but the fact is that the project has had a number of issues over the last 12 to 18 months.
And this is spectacularly bad timing, really, because the Greater Wellington Regional Council have got a bid in to central government for 15 hybrid units that would extend the very effective train network. I don't think there's too many complaints about the train network at the moment, but extend it to Masterton and also to Palmerston North. And I see you've put out a statement welcoming this and also advocating electrification to Otaki. So the fact that we've got the Transport Ministry possibly looking askance at the Greater Wellington Regional Council seems to be spectacular bad timing.
Yeah, so I guess the main thing to mention there is the project itself, in terms of the rail project that Greater Wellington are putting forward, in itself is a good proposal. So regardless of who is looking to deliver it, I mean, there's no doubt that we need increased capacity, given the growth projections that Greater Wellington have produced. Obviously, the capital connection is at risk of not continuing because of the ageing infrastructure, the actual engines themselves and so forth. The big one, which I guess is what you're alluding to, is whether the government has confidence in Greater Wellington on delivering that, given their performance with the bus network. And I mean, again, there's no benefit in us as a council pointing the finger at Greater Wellington and getting the knife into them. What we're better doing is supporting them, supporting the business case. I know Horowhenua and Palmerston North do as well, because I was involved in the working party that actually developed the original business case. So equally, Horizons and naturally Greater Wellington support this proposal that has gone to central government for consideration. So I think at the end of the day, we've just got to be united in supporting the investment If the government decides that it isn't Greater Wellington who should be doing it, it should be a different authority, then it's obviously up to them. And if I heard you correctly, the proposal is from... Is it from
the National
that a proposal?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so even that, you've got to kind of take that with a grain of salt. We don't know, who's going to be in power in another 12 to 18 or another 18 months to 2 years. So some of those are a little bit of buts and maybes. And from my perspective, all we've got to do is focus on who's currently considering that, which is the coalition, Labour coalition, and who's putting that proposal forward, which is Greater Wellington, who currently have the authority to do so.
Indeed. James, I'd like to ask you about the electrification to Otaki, which seems to be quite a big number. If we have these hybrid units, do we need electrification to Otaki?
So look, my wording around this in terms of elections and any other commentary has always been improved rail services to Otaki. Naturally, everyone would love electrification, and hence why we've included that in the media release. We're not going to say no if they're going to offer electrification as a solution, but from what I'm hearing from Greater Wellington, the more palatable option in the short to medium term are these diesel hybrid trains. Quite frankly, I don't care if it's going to provide increased public transport options for my community. And so, look, it's a little bit like playing poker. You've got to play your hand, and you can't kind of put it all into one move. Equally, I've had people say to me, what about the Otaki to North of Levin Road? Are you not supporting that anymore as a councillor because you're asking for this rail package? I'm asking for both. I mean, I've got people within my community that want safer travel to Levin and Palmerston North. So it's not either or, it's both and. The same as I've had people ask about the Peka interchange, which I understand is a little bit more contentious, but again, I've got a responsibility to those in that community to advocate for that as well.
How many powers do the KCDC have in transport? Isn't it mainly, obviously you've got responsibility for the local roads, and the revocation you mentioned means there's going to be a lot more responsibility in that regard. But in terms of public transport, in fact, all you can do is make your views known, surely.
Yeah, so advocacy, and it's been interesting taking on these portfolios. I've had most of the inquiries I've had since being the portfolio holder of transport have all been issues that are outside of our control. Yeah. So, I mean, I've had people contacting me about bus stops, the frequency of bus stops at Parapara Umu Beach, bus stops down Te Moana Road in Waikanae, bus shelters, and again, all of those inquiries that I've had come through have all been Greater Wellington issues. I mean, it's their funding, it's their political decision in terms of how many they do each year, and so, you're right, we don't have a lot of direct influence on that from a decision-making perspective, but what we do is from an advocacy perspective, and we can also tell that story to Greater Wellington around ageing demographic, the need for more bus shelters, which I would say we've been doing for a number of years. This is nothing new. It's not like we haven't been doing that. And equally, Greater Wellington have the same struggle that we do in terms of balancing rate increases. So, I mean, they could put in 5 bus shelters a year, but rates would be higher.
You do have a more direct role in bus shelters, as I understand it, in that the placement of bus shelters is a responsibility of the district council, and the negotiations with neighbours, etc., I believe can be quite contentious. Some people simply don't want a bus stop outside their house.
Yeah, correct, and that doesn't always happen. I mean, but you're right, you get the occasions where people don't want a congregation of people out in front of their property, let alone a dwelling in terms of the shelter itself. But I mean, as I said to one resident last week in Waikanae, just because Kapiti Coast District Council liaises with the neighbours over the site of the shelter, and whether it goes in front of 22 or 24 Te Moana Road or whatever it is, the council couldn't make a decision to put in an extra 10 and then that binds Greater Wellington to actually put them in. It's Greater Wellington that determines the bus route, it determines the frequency of stops, and it determines the locations in terms of that they're going to have 5 bus shelters along Te Moana Road. So they make the decisions about how many and sort of where in terms of the rough area, and then it's Kapiti Coast District Council that I understand works with those property owners to get approval.
And I understand there's going to be a review of the bus services next year, so perhaps the KCDC will be part of that.
Yeah, and look, as population and demographics change, that obviously shows the need continually for that to be reviewed, hence why there is a review. So, we had one in Otaki where we made quite significant changes to the bus route, and applaud Greater Wellington for the work they did with us on that to get a service that better suits our community.
But we still need more.
Well, absolutely. And look, it's a tension for them, though, in terms of we'll always say we need more.
Of course.
They will often say that, the numbers aren't quite there, the patronage isn't there. However, the numbers they showed for the business case for rail show quite the opposite. The numbers are just almost exploding in terms of the use of public transport. And I would say that's with it being dogged with issues. Almost every week there is buses being put on to replace rail. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh there, but I follow the alerts on the Metlink app, and there are constantly network issues. But part of that $415 million package was for more investment to address some of that ageing infrastructure.
Indeed, and I'm told there's a bit of money around for infrastructure, so the next few months could be very interesting. Thank you very much. Sorry.
So look, I'd be quite surprised if the government doesn't look at this favourably, apart from the issues with Greater Wellington over the bus. They've got some money there. There's no doubt they've got a surplus, and this is certainly a project that would give them some big ticks within the community. So I hope they support it.
James Cootes, I thank you for joining us this morning. All the very best and season's greetings to you and yours.
106.3 Beach FM.